Mummy's Always on Top, the queer coding of contemporary WWE characters. Hello and welcome to the very long overdue first episode in Season 2 of Amorous Histories podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm Annie, your host and resident history nerd for the next 30 minutes. If you're new to the party, pull up a chair, grab a drink, and make sure the children have gone to bed, unless you want to have to explain to them what Fetishware is. If you like the vibes, you can follow me wherever you get your podcasts and on social media. I'm at Amorous Histories on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and TikTok, and at AmorousHistPod on Twitter. You can like, share, comment and all of that good stuff so that more people join us at the party. Transcripts and sources for each show are available on the website amoroushistories.co.uk, along with links to the bookshop.org affiliate account and some other goodies. I'm kicking off the season with a slightly left of field episode. We're going to be talking about queer coding in WWE. WWE, or World Wrestling Entertainment, is a global entertainment company that produces professional wrestling events. They have 2 live TV shows a week, Raw and SmackDown, as well as about 12 pay-per-view events like WrestleMania and Royal Rumble, and house events, which are live matches that are not televised or key to the current story arcs. The best way I can think of describing it to someone who knows nothing about WWE is wrestling but with a scripted storyline. There's drama, comedy, romance, and pro wrestling matches. The WWE universe is a strange combination of reality and fiction, but everyone involved in making the show pretends it's real, something called kayfabe. If you go to the WWE website, all of the articles and press releases act like the things that happened in the show, such as injuries or relationship changes, are real, but they're not. It's basically immersive theatre. I found that quite hard to understand at first, but now I'm on board, it makes sense. It's weird, hammy, and very much like a pantomime, but once you get over the oddness of it, it's quite fun. For context, I'm going to give you a brief history of WWE before we get to the good stuff. It was founded in 1952 by Americans Jess McMahon and Toots Mond under the name Capital Wrestling Corporation. The business has remained in the McMahon family since then and is run by Vince McMahon Jr., his daughter Stephanie, and her husband Paul Levesque, also known as Triple H. The company has had several name changes over the decades. Some of you may remember its 90s iteration, WWF, World Wrestling Federation, but the World Wildlife Fund filed a lawsuit against them over the trademark, so in 2002 they changed their name to WWE, and that's what it's currently known as. If you remember WWF, then you too may have vivid memories of the quite frankly very messy Attitude Era, with wrestlers such as Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Chyna, The Undertaker, Triple H, Kane, Lita, Eddie Guerrero, Trish Stratus, and more. After the name change, the company continued to grow, expanding into other forms of entertainment, including movies, video games, and further TV shows. It has also become known for its philanthropic efforts, including partnerships with organisations like Make-A-Wish, although this is probably not for selfless reasons. In recent years, the company has faced criticism for its treatment of wrestlers and allegations of mistreatment and unsafe working conditions. They try to claim that their wrestlers are contractors or freelancers, not employees, so they're not provided with the protections or benefits employees are entitled to, which is hilarious from a company that has written into the wrestlers' contracts that they can't work for other companies and that WWE owns rights to the wrestlers' characters. There are also a lot of allegations of sexual assault and racism. Currently, in summer 2023, there is a lawsuit in the USA that's been filed by a former WWE staff writer against a number of WWE staff and management for alleged racism, sexism, and discrimination. The details of that lawsuit are fucking shocking, but the world is so shitty that it's also not surprising. WWE seemingly isn't a great workplace to be in if you're not a cishet white man. So, why am I talking about WWE on a History of Sex and Sexuality podcast? Well, long story short, my TikTok For You page presented me with Rhea Ripley. It realised I like what I saw, so kept feeding it to me, and now I'm mildly in love with her. To satisfy my new Rhea Ripley addiction, I started watching WWE, and because I'm a massive nerd, I accidentally spent a lot of the time analysing everything from costumes to the script. This resulted in me wondering if any other nerds out there had written about WWE in relation to sex, sexuality, gender, and race. Of course they have. So I've had a whale of a time researching and writing this episode. Before we jump in, I'm going to say this very clearly. I'm not here to speculate on the sexuality or the lives of the real people who play these fictional characters. I'm just queering the WWE universe because that's what people like me do. I'm also hyper aware that this is written from the point of view of a Western person talking about other Western people, and the examples I employ may not be globally applicable. If you're listening to this, having never watched WWE before, visually it's very gay, super homoerotic. The men are usually wearing tight little shorts or trousers and are oiled up, rolling around with each other. With the women wrestlers, it's less gay because they are primarily there to appeal to the male gaze. That's gaze, G-A-Z-E, the theory that women are represented in the media as sexual objects for the pleasure of heterosexual men. The smaller women tend to wear less clothes, and the older or bigger women tend to wear more. I don't know if that's through choice, because they were told to, or a bit of both. Even if it was through choice, us women have been taught to view ourselves through the male gaze anyway. So yes, it's very gay, and I can see a lot of queer coding. Queer coding is the intentional or unintentional habit of making fictional characters appear to be part of the LGBTQ+ community. Although a character's sexual orientation is frequently not mentioned in the narrative because they display traits wider society associates with queerness, the general public tends to view the character as queer. This can be done via mannerisms, speech, fashion, the use of certain colours, physical appearance, and more. Writers may employ stereotypes or tropes, or they may use less obvious signifiers that only members of the LGBTQ+ community would recognise. Equally, they can be completely clueless that a certain aspect of a character implies queerness, because they are not aware of the less overt signifiers. But that doesn't mean that those of us in the know can't read a character as queer. For this episode, I'm specifically interested in the queer-coded costumes of the Judgement Day, a group of WWE wrestlers who have formed a temporary alliance. The group currently on Raw is made up of Damien Preist, Dominic Mysterio, Finn Balor, and Rhea Ripley. The characters of this group are currently villains, or heels in wrestling speak, within the storyline. The Judgement Day's fashion choices primarily include black and purple material. They are clad in faux leather and PVC. They're accessorised with studs, chains, dark makeup, piercings, handkerchiefs, and chunky boots. They are quite hot. I'll share images on my social media for reference. In her book Dress Codes, fashion theorist Ruth Rubenstein wrote about tie signs. These are fashion-based signals that tie historically marginalised groups together. She notes that, quote, individuals adopt the attire to announce commitment to the group and are aware that it places them outside the confines of established and institutional order. Members of the LGBTQ+ community have historically used tie signs to identify themselves to others. In regards to the Judgement Day, we'll start with their handkerchiefs. If you don't know, handkerchiefs or bandanas are a queer signal with a varied history. The hanky code, or flagging, popularised in 70s and 80s USA, is primarily used by gay men to signal what and who they're into via the hanky colour and placement. For example, if a hanky is in your left back pocket, that indicates that you're a sub-bottom, and if it's in your right back pocket, that indicates that you're a dom top. Generally, the colour codes are as follows. Red is fisting, orange anything goes, yellow is water sports, which is pee stuff, green is escort work, light blue is oral sex, dark blue is anal sex, purple is piercing in you know where, grey is bondage, black is S&M, and brown is scat play, which is poop stuff. And different geographical locations seem to have specific variations on that. If you're curious, give it a Google. This reminded me of 18th century Mollies in London who would, whilst cruising, pop a white handkerchief through the tails of their frock coat to indicate interest in another man. I'd like an award for relating WWE back to the 18th century, please and thank you. The Judgement Day carry purple bandanas. Usually Finn Balor will have one in his right back pocket. Occasionally Rhea Ripley will wear one around her neck or in her back pocket, and Dominic Mysterio likewise. What I'm not saying necessarily is that these characters are gay, but that arguably they're queer-coded. And it wouldn't be the first time we've seen a queer-coded villain, would it? I'm looking at you, Disney. In their article, Campy and Corrupt, Disney's Fixation with Queer-Coding Villains, Gemma Rasso writes, quote, that queer-coding is equally as much in the eye of the viewer as it is in the creator. It was not always the intention, deliberate or otherwise, to make these characters be in line with harmful presumptions of queer people. Our perception of these villains as queer is equally related to our understanding of queer behaviour and definitions learned through media and society. I think this is interesting because it highlights that this coding isn't always the intention of the writer or character creator, but instead it is a reflection of the audience's own understanding of a particular community's characteristics, whether the audience is cognizant of their associations or not. I might be sitting there watching WWE thinking about how gay it all is because I'm aware of contemporary and historical queer signals due to my academic interests. Someone who doesn't share that interest may not make the same associations. Equally, the writers may not know that they're using queer signals. I'm going to make the assumption that there is little to no queer representation in that writer's room, given what I've read of the WWE staff and management. You might be shouting at me about the varying gang affiliations with coloured bandanas, especially given the Judgement Day's violent bullying behaviour. In the world of USA gangs, purple is associated with the Grape Street Crips, who are based in the Watts area of LA, California. But none of the Judgement Day characters are associated with LA, so I feel like this interpretation falls flat. Talking of purple, that's a pretty gay colour. We've got the Lavender Menace, Lavender Scare, Lavender Nights, the Lavender Rhino, Purple Hours, and flowers such as violets and lilacs as queer signals, as well as the numerous different pride flags featuring purple. The Judgement Day's colours of purple and black are used for their costumes, entrance graphics, lighting, makeup, and merch. The Queer Colours article on tvtropes.org notes that, quote, in fiction, a queer character will often be associated with their pride flag colours to emphasise their sexuality or gender identity. These colours can show up in their physical appearance or outfits, or in more subtle cues like cinematography, lighting, or a specific colour wash. Think the bisexual lighting phase creators went through in the 2010s. In her article From Lavender to Violet, The Lesbian Obsession with Purple, Eleanor Medhurst writes about the history of queerness and purple, noting that the colour, quote, clearly has a welcoming home within the queer culture and activism, lavender the most vocal among its shades. I cannot recommend Eleanor's Dressing Dykes website enough. It's a great resource for anyone interested in the history of lesbian fashion. So purple and the LGBTQ+ community clearly have a documented affinity. Do you know who else uses purple for their queer-coded villains? Disney. I'm thinking of Ursula, Maleficent, Ratcliffe, Captain Hook, the Evil Queen, and Frollo, to name but a few. Much has been written about the villains in Disney being queer-coded, so if that interests you, there is plenty of content out there. Now I'm going to make a seamless transition from Disney to Fetishware, the clothing and accessories worn by members of the fetish community. This commonly includes leather, latex, rubber, chains, studs, harnesses, and chokers, to name but a few. To me, that sounds like a description of some Judgement Day members' fashion choices. What we recognise today as fetish fashion came to prominence in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Apparently, those naughty Victorians loved a bit of silk and velvet. Since then, fetish fashion has become increasingly popular, and thanks to runway fashion, aspects of it have been appropriated and worn by the masses. Fetishware also has a strong association with the LGBTQ community and can often be seen at pride marches and queer clubs. Think Leathermen and Leather Dykes. One member of the Judgement Day comes to mind in regard to fetish fashion, and that is Rhea Ripley, or Mummy as she is affectionately referred to. The fashion of Rhea's character has evolved over the last couple of years, becoming both more sexually provocative and queerer. She can commonly be seen in a structured leather look bralette, PVC hot pants or trousers, fishnets, studs, chains, chokers, leather jackets, combat boots, a chest or thigh harness, and loads of piercings. Clearly a punk-inspired look. In her article Leather Jackets, Army Boots, 1980s Rebel Dyke Fashion, Eleanor Medhurst wrote about the Rebel Dykes, who were London-based punk lesbians. To quote Eleanor, one of the staples of punk fashion is the customization of clothing. Anti-fashion rather than fashion, ripping up clothes and starting again, drawing symbols that contest the norm, covering garments in badges and pins. One of the women Eleanor spoke to for the article, Sabrina, said she had, quote, German army parachuting boots and would put loads of studs all the way around and draw on lesbian signs of double axes and stuff. Some of Rhea's most iconic pieces are her sleeveless leather jackets that are covered in spikes, studs, patches, badges, safety pins, and she made them herself. In 2020, Demi Bennett, who plays Rhea, told WWE's TV interview series The Bump, quote, I'm a very creative person and I'm also a perfectionist. So I have to have the studs in like the perfect place, like they have to be spaced perfectly. I have stopped making my pants. I used to stud them. So I used to get my pants made and I would put all the studs and all the cool stuff on it, but I've had to stop doing that because I'm so busy because it takes a lot of time. I still make my jackets. I have to make something and making jackets is just my favourite thing. Demi sounds very punky. And do you know where the punk scene took its fashion inspiration from? The fetish scene. Specifically from what I've read, and bear in mind that I'm not a fashion historian, Vivienne Westwood can be largely credited with pioneering punk fashion after she became accidental stylist to the Sex Pistols. Hers and Malcolm McLaren's London-based shop, Sex, was chock full of fetishware, sold to 70s punks as shocking and subversive fashion pieces. But as these things usually go, this fashion has become mainstream and is apparently now called fetishcore. In a 2022 article for The Cut, Amelia Petrarca interviewed two dominatrixes, Mistress Iris and Mistress Marley, about the popularisation of fetish fashion. Mistress Iris said, quote, I'm definitely not a gatekeeper. I think it's great that it has become popular, but I think it is important to highlight, for those who are not aware, that the people they are inspired by are being silenced. The sad reality is that people who inspired this get erased from the public, while people who kind of appropriated it get to keep existing. Mistress Marley noted, quote, it's like, okay, you want to utilise what we do and what we wear, but at the same time, you're not donating to our community, you're not donating to sex workers, you're not standing up for our rights. So sometimes we do feel like we're just being used as an aesthetic and no one's taking us seriously. I really feel what they're saying here. Fashion designers are happy to appropriate and capitalise on the looks of marginalised communities without acknowledgement, and see those looks filter down into high street stores for everyone to wear. But those original community members don't benefit from it, and they're still maligned by wider society. Although I'm not accusing any wrestlers of appropriating fashion, because who knows what they get up to in the bedroom, I did want to ensure I included the voices of sex workers in this section. And if you're interested in the history of punk's intersection with fetish fashion, check out Vivienne Westwood's early career. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Rhea is intentionally dressed to make you think of a dominatrix. Her character is dominant, violent, sexy, and provocative. Her nickname is Mummy. You can buy official merch that says, she's my mummy, and Mummy's always on top. When the crowd boos her or her kayfabe boyfriend, Dominic Mysterio, she instructs them to, quote, suck it, whilst gesturing at her groin. Wrestling aficionados will recognise this as a riff of 90s and noughties WWF group D-Generation X's signature move. Within the script, there's a lot of jokes about Mummy getting what she wants, Mummy's always right, Dominic does what Mummy tells him to do, Dominic wears the She's My Mummy shirt, which is riffing off another old WWF storyline. In this kayfabe relationship, Rhea is the dom top, and Dominic is the sub bottom. So you could argue that the Fetishware does make sense. Rhea's character also gives us some pretty impressive lesbian vibes. Not only because of the fetish fashion, but also all of the other queer signals, including the sensible footwear, boots and trainers, thumb rings, short hair, an undercut, and short nails. Yes, some of these are stereotypes, but they're born out of real historical and contemporary signifiers. Currently on TikTok, there are a lot of posts about how women loving women do their nails. All short, only select one short and the rest long. If you've got long nails, does it imply to others you're not queer? It's a whole thing, but only certain people are going to know that it's a thing. As with all identity signals, the ones mentioned in this episode are not exclusive. Not everyone with a handkerchief in their back pocket is a gay man. Not everyone wearing a thumb ring is a lesbian. In Assertion, Sensible Footwear is a lesbian camp, Eleanor Medhurst writes, quote, "Fashions that originated in various corners of the LGBTQ community have been encouraged to run wild through the fashion landscape, being claimed and worn by whoever likes the look of them. Queer fashion consistently walks a few steps ahead of the heterosexual norm, but our clothing history is no longer ours alone." I guess the reason I take part in academic queering of fictional characters for fun is to highlight the sometimes forgotten meanings of certain fashion choices and the marginalised groups who've had their tie signs appropriated by people who are not part of or not acknowledging these groups. I don't think WWE anticipated how much positive attention Rhea Ripley would receive whilst dressed as a punky, kinky queer. But both pre-existing wrestling fans and people on the internet whose algorithm exposed them to Rhea have fallen completely head over heels for her. Just search #Rhea Ripley to see all of the lusty sapphic edit videos made of her. She has 2.3 million followers on TikTok and 2.7 million followers on Instagram. I think she's the most followed WWE superstar on TikTok, which is really something. However, now WWE have cottoned on to Rhea's popularity, they are writing their scripts and story arcs to use her as bait, especially in the run-up to one of their monthly pay-per-view events. The story will be Rhea and whichever female wrestler have developed a rivalry. There will be a Rhea versus whoever match billed on Raw, but for some reason it won't come to fruition. And this will happen for a couple of weeks until the pay-per-view, where there will be a usually short match and sort of end to the argument as a winner is crowned. For example, her fight with Natalya at Night of Champions lasted all of about 30 seconds. They are literally using Rhea as queerbait. In their thesis, WWE Redefining Working Class Womanhood Through Commodified Feminism, Janice M. Sycon notes that, quote, "WWE is a business first and foremost. Therefore, the main goal of the company is to support whatever would generate the most profit and to avoid anything too radical that may alienate the consumer base. So WWE is not going to do anything that's truly revolutionary or challenges the worldview of their audience. WWE want you to find Rhea Ripley attractive, but they're not going to champion any of the communities her character's look takes inspiration from. It should be noted that Demi Bennett, who plays Rhea Ripley, is clearly an ally and has expressed her love for her LGBTQ plus fans in many interviews. So my criticism is not aimed at her. There is so much to say on sex, sexuality, gender and race in WWE. I could write thousands upon thousands of words on the subject, but I have to stop somewhere, mostly because I'm hungry and I need to do some washing up. I hope you enjoyed this episode, but if not, I'll be back on brand on the next episode. I also have some exciting interviews lined up with people who seriously know their sex history stuff, so stay tuned. I'd really love for you to share any sources you think are relevant to the episode, so others interested in the topic can indulge in some further reading. Just drop me the details in the comments section of the podcast website, social media, the platform you're listening on, or DM or email me. I'll do my best to gather all the extra sources and list them on the relevant episode's webpage. Feel free to DM me or email amoroushistories@gmail.com if you have any questions, episode suggestions, or want to collab. I've found that if I'm only doing something for myself, I won't do it. So I figured if people send me episode suggestions, I'm more likely to do the work because there's an external motivation. My brain is stupid. Yes. So if you like this episode, please leave Amorous Histories a little review or some stars on your podcast app or website. You should be able to find me wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow my socials at Amorous Histories on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and TikTok, and at Amorous Hispod on Twitter. Transcripts and sources are at amoroushistories.co.uk. Until next time, stay sexy.